And welcome everybody. I'm so excited for you to take an hour out of your day. I know it's busy and you could be like eating a sandwich somewhere, so I appreciate you taking that time. Just for anyone that didn't catch my intro at the beginning, I am Christina Blacken. I'm a writer, a performer, and genuinely believe in the power of storytelling to change perception and behavior, both on a personal level with your relationship with yourself, and then also with how other people perceive one another. And I've been building a storytelling program. I write stories, and I'm just really excited to sort of teach how powerful we are in defining our own stories. So I'll dive right in. I'm going to go full screen, and I think you guys should be able to see this okay. Um, but yeah, so this talk is really called Stop Asking for Permission. And the reason why I said that is I really genuinely believe that we're taught to constantly sort of doubt ourselves and to feel like we have to ask to be a part of the conversation or to be in a room. And we generally don't have to do that. I mean, we obviously know there's lots of men out there that don't do that. They just step into a room and take space, whether they deserve to be there or not. So it's important to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. I got to move this little bar here. There's like a thing in the way. There we go. But I wanted to start out with a quote from one of my favorite ladies of all time, Audre Lorde. She's an incredible writer, feminist, activist. She died in the 90s, but her words still live on way past her time. And she wrote, "I write for those who do not have a voice because they are terrified, because we are taught to respect fear more than ourselves. We've been taught that silence will save us, but it won't." And I think the key thing to remember there is being taught silence. We're taught very quickly and very early on that taking up space and speaking is dangerous, it's vulnerable, it's messy, and we shouldn't do it. And that's the antithesis to change. It's the antithesis to building anything powerful or important. So it's something to keep in mind that she felt compelled to give a voice to people who feel like they couldn't. And I think we can all take a note from her book, even if we're not famous authors, to do the same. So today we'll be covering three distinct topics. One of them is just a description of the power of beliefs. I call it the golden ticket, like it's Willy Wonka style, because I do believe understanding beliefs and how they affect you are really important for building stories and for sharing your work in the world. And then the other two components are exercises. So I asked in the overview of this sort of talk to bring a pen and paper. If you don't have that, totally cool. That's something you can write down on your computer. But ultimately, we'll be working through two exercises that can help you with framing your communications and also shifting any limiting beliefs you have about your work. So let's just dive right into beliefs. And I'm not talking about sort of like the church belief where you go to church on Sunday, you're in the pew, you're stomping out for Jesus, and you can see James Brown here sweating it out with this beautiful crescent curl. But ultimately, belief is all about your subconscious understanding of yourself in the world. And so many of us hold beliefs that we're either not conscious of or we don't talk about, but they influence all of our actions and the actions of others around us. So I just wanted to give a little bit of science because we love science, right? I mean, everything feels better when it's science-backed. But there's been a couple of studies on how powerful beliefs are for affecting action. So the first study I wanted to quickly describe was one where researchers were studying healthcare and just what motivates people to eat healthily. And I can completely relate to this. I'm on a keto diet. I'm trying to get my blood sugar under control. So I am like, give me some information that can help me get it together. And the study found that individuals who had a bigger belief in their self-efficacy, that means they believed in their success, that they could change their particular circumstance, were more likely to eat well and exercise, regardless of their background or their weight. And so it was pretty critical, that attitude that certain people in the study held and what their outcomes were. And the second study is really one of my favorite ones because it's all about overconfidence. There are studies about are people who come in a room and they claim certain things and say that they have certain skills that they may not be able to back up. How are their perceptions in public with other people? And the study found that overconfident people still appear socially skilled and higher in status, even when people have evidence of their actual ability. So like that fake it till you make it mantra is the real deal. And today I'm not saying to fake it or to lie because it's disingenuous. People hate people who make overstated results about their skills. But there's some real serious power in believing your own abilities and shifting your actions based on true proofs of your beliefs. So I wanted to give you a quick anecdote from my own personal life about how powerful beliefs have been. So this is a picture of my family. They're so cute. Those are my two sisters in the left corner and my cousin in the right. And we got on the trend to remake these family photos where you kind of redo them from your childhood. So it's real cute. But I was raised in Utah, and being in Utah as a Black woman was a struggle. There's not a lot of diversity, racial diversity, religious diversity, political diversity. Everybody's very similar. And that put me in a lot of situations where I had to grapple with unconscious bias, implicit bias, racism, sexism, classism, you name it. And I've always wanted to write about these experiences because I felt like it was important to share. But I held myself back because I felt like it was a self-indulgent exercise of, oh, if I write about this, who's going to care? Like, who cares about this stuff that I went through? Like, this isn't important to share. And I was also really worried about how my family would perceive it because I was essentially sort of showcasing their experience and their perspective in the stories. And I had one particular story recently where I recounted an experience where me and my sister, we were on an adventure to go play on our neighbor's trampoline. And in the process, we learned that we would be treated differently because of what we looked like. So the neighbors didn't allow us to go inside the house. We had to sit outside while our white friends went inside. They had us drink in the hose in the backyard. It was summertime and it was hot and we were thirsty, but we had to drink out of the hose because we weren't allowed to go drink water inside. And so there were just these key components of that experience that give light and context to what implicit bias is. So I wrote the story and I sat on it for a year. I was like, there's no way I'm going to share this. It's going to have bad reactions. My family's going to hate it. And then I finally started thinking, well, what if I shared this? What impacts would it have on people's understandings of implicit bias? Because implicit bias is this academic term that no one knows what the hell it means. And there's no examples or context of what it feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like. So I shifted my thinking and belief about this story from being self-indulgent and disrespectful to being a powerful example of the dangerousness of implicit bias. So when I was motivated by the result and outcome of sharing the story, I completely changed my approach to it. So I published it and I immediately had a response. People were sharing it. My family loved it, which was shocking to me. They're like, yeah, this is so funny. I remember that day and you guys were on the trampoline. And I also got an opportunity to join a storytelling festival in August to tell the story. So if I hadn't changed my thinking about the power of what the story could have and not necessarily being afraid of the negative outcomes, I never would have had these experiences or opportunities. So it's incredibly, I cannot emphasize it enough, important to understand how your limiting beliefs around your storytelling, around your abilities can really hinder your work. So I'm going to dive right on into the first exercise. And so these exercises are written exercises. The first one here is called The Recipe, because I love giving things names because it's fun. But it's a storytelling exercise that can help you to frame any communication you're creating. Now, if that's a pitch to a potential funder, if it's a pitch to a potential partner or client, this framework can help you to set up what your communication is, and it can help you to have more influence and impact in what you're saying. So what I'll do is I'll read through each step. We'll pause and I'll give you 1 minute on a timer on my phone. So you have exactly 1 minute to write down your responses, and then we'll move on to the next step. And then at the end, I would love for one or two of you to share what you may have written from this exercise, and we can talk about it a little bit. But so the storytelling exercise really covers 3 key components to a powerful story. And when I say story, that just means narrative. It can be a short message, it can be an elevator pitch, or a longer form article, for instance. But every great story has 3 things. It has a purpose. So there's something you're trying to teach, something you're trying to convey in this message. It has a service. So it's particularly meeting some sort of need from the readers or the people who are listening to it. And it provides an emotional trigger, which means it provokes some sort of feeling or emotion in the listener and in the teller. So whether it's happiness, sadness, aspiration, inspiration, escape, laughter, there's some kind of emotional trigger happening in the story. So let's go through this first step of the exercise, and I will let you guys know when I've started the timer. So get your pens and your paper ready, or your digital pads, whatever you're going to do to document this. So step 1 is all about creating belief statements. Now, these statements are very simple. They are just truths that you hold about your work and the things that you create, and they can be simple. They don't have to be complex. It essentially gets down to the core of why you're doing what you're doing, what the motivations are behind your work. So I have a few examples here. For instance, you could say, I believe physical movement is imperative to the development of every person. That's just a truth that you have around work, and maybe you work in fitness. Or I believe community is key to solving the world's biggest problems, and you're big on being a connector and facilitator in the work that you do. Or finally, I believe everyone deserves self-care and pampering, and maybe you have a product that allows people to self-care for themselves or to give back to themselves in certain ways. So I'm going to just quickly exit out of the little presentation so I can look at the screen here. All right, so I'm going to put 1 minute on my timer, and then I will let you guys know when the minute is done, and we will just complete the step one. So you can start now. All right, you got 20 more seconds. All right, time. So the reason I give you a minute is because we want your honest first response. I think sometimes when there's a time constraint, it makes you just quickly be more free of consciousness, which can be really helpful so you're not overthinking things. All right, so let's do step two. So step two is all about identifying pain points. So this is the part of your work that you feel solves a particular pain point for your community. So you're going to identify 2 to 3 pain points that you're currently trying to work towards in your work. Now, these pain points can be mental, they can be physical, they can be small, they can be large, but ultimately you need to be clear on what kind of problem you're passionate about solving that relates to your work. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to write down 2 to 3 simple sentences. It can be single words, whatever you feel is best, to describe those pain points. So you can begin now, and you'll get 1 minute. You have 20 more seconds. All right, time. So this is the last component of this framework, and then we'll bring it all together in the next slide. So step three is all about the emotions that you want to communicate with any message you're creating around your work. So it can be 2 to 3 simple adjectives. You can list out the types of emotions, and it's ultimately, think about it as the impression you're making with your work. Do you want people to feel light or joyful or dark or heavy or sexy or earnest, humorous, sincere, when they read what you're writing or if they listen to what you're saying about your work? So it's important to identify the sort of tone and style that you're going for. So I'll give you 1 minute to write down just 2 to 3 adjectives about the emotion you're trying to evoke from your storytelling or the message you're sharing. And then on the next slide, we'll bring it all together. So I'm going to let you guys start now. You have 20 more seconds. And time. Now, this is a obviously truncated version of this exercise. It's always better to go off and sit down and luxuriate and drink a tea and go through these questions so you can get much deeper insights into the type of messaging that you want to create. But this is a good starting point. And I also think this rapid fire way can help you to get quickly through some blocks you may have if you overthink things or overanalyzing stuff. So this next slide brings it all together into what I call a T&Q communication statement. So this statement is what you would use as an outline for an elevator pitch, for a message, for building any sort of story. And it's really important to do this. I think people probably know this, but a lot of writers, they'll sit down and they'll outline what they're trying to say. And so this is a great way, even if you're not writing the longest, novel or anything, just knowing what you need to say and why can be half the battle of getting over the fears and the doubts of what you want to share with people. So, from those three lists that you've created, I want you to circle one belief, one pain point, and one adjective that best resonates with the story that you want to tell right now about your product or creation. And obviously, that could change over time. There could be multiple types of things that relate to your brand. So I'm not saying this has to be the end all be all for you, but it's a good starting point for clarifying what you want to say right now about your creation. And you're going to insert them Mad Lib style into the following sentence structure because Mad Libs are fun and adults should have fun. So what you'll say is in the first sentence, I believe, and you insert the belief statement that you circled. So that's, for instance, I believe fitness is important for development. So you'd put that in that sentence. The second sentence is my community or tribe needs blank. So you would put the pain point that you circled in that sentence. So my community and tribe needs tools for physical development, for instance. And then the last sentence that you'll write out is I'll create a story or message that uses blank, and that's the adjective that you circled. So it could be humor and earnesty to communicate blank. So that's how your product addresses their need. So an example below that kind of relates to the sort of work I do is I believe the stories we tell ourselves about our worth and talents can help or hinder our creativity. So that's a belief I have about storytelling. My community needs tools and guidance to improve their creative outputs. So that's that second one of what is the tribe's pain points? What is your audience's pain points? And then you end with I'll create messaging that uses humor to communicate how storytelling techniques and belief exercises can help them improve their creative outputs and products. So it's just a great way of clarifying what you want to say, why it's important and relevant, and how it addresses the audience, and how you want to say it, what kind of language or feelings or emotions that you want to create. Now, I'm just going to quickly walk through why this structure works, and then would love to have one or two of you share some insights you may have gotten from this exercise. So why it works essentially is you're building your messaging from a belief or value versus your fear-based needs. So that sounds very simple, but most people when they create marketing or they share their story, it's all me, 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 me. Hey, 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 I have this offer. Look at me, I'm great, I'm peacocking, I'm so great, I have all these achievements. Who cares, right? Like there's a million people vying for your attention. People pay attention to things that's going to help them with the things they're grappling with the pains that they have. And it also gives you more conviction on sharing your solution because it's not based on your worth as a person. And for women, I think that's a really important distinction because a lot of us feel you as a person is a reflection of the work that you're doing. There are plenty of trash men in the world who've created decent products and like decent things, but they're just trash people. So you can be a trash person and still build an incredible product. I don't think you should do that, but just to say, if you have fears about imposter syndrome, that means that you're a great person and you care very deeply about having a good result for people. So it's not an impediment. It doesn't mean that it's a flaw. It just means that you're a good person. So you should shift that thinking to, let's make this about the outcomes and the beliefs and the results and not about me as an individual, because that allows you to have more conviction on what you're sharing versus, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I sexy enough? It's no, I genuinely believe in this truth about this problem. And here's how I think that truth can solve this problem. The second reason why it works is it caters your messaging to be, again, about service and problem solving versus just promotion. So leading with someone's pain points, they will listen immediately. If I'm like, hey, I struggle with storytelling, you do too, you're more likely to listen to that than being like, I am a famous marketer that you too could be like me and Amazon 5 stars. Like, no one's going to care about that. But they're going to care about what you can actually do for them that's helpful. So it's always important to lead with that in any communication, especially in pitching. People want to know how you're going to help them. And then the final point of why the structure works is it just helps to define the communication style. So why you'll stand out, it adds personality, because a lot of the time, nothing's new under the sun. What's new is your particular spin and your version of it. So it's important to figure out, what do you want to stand for? What sort of impression do you want to make? And that comes down to personal preference versus there's one particular right way to do it. It also makes you more genuine and relatable. People like to relate to people who they can see that they're being their authentic selves. And everyone talks about authenticity ad nauseum, and they don't necessarily practice it. So this is a great way of practicing that authenticity. But does anybody at all want to share, anything they wrote down, or particularly an insight they may have had from this exercise? I might just pick somebody. How about Kristen? What do you think?
Well, I hate to say it, but I didn't actually do the exercise because I don't really want to tell any stories right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I do think it's a great structure.
Got it, got it. What about Serene? Did you do it?
Yeah, I didn't put it all together because I was too busy listening to, but I can give you, okay, so um, I believe parents can shift the world towards racial equity by how they parent their own children. I believe parents don't have easy or accessible information to know how to parent more insightfully, especially parents of color. And then that's all I got. I don't have the third part yet.
Got it. Awesome, awesome. Does anybody else want to share? Cool. Okay, we'll move on to the next exercise. But yeah, this is just something that you can keep in mind, and anytime you're building any sort of pitch, any sort of messaging, it's really important to kind of keep this framework in the back of your mind when you're creating it. So now we're going to shift over to inner narrative exercises. So this is all about imposter syndrome, your limiting beliefs, and why it's important to shift those. And what's really important here is we're providing proofs to you of your own abilities so that you can overcome negative self-talk. And there's a lot of research studies around how important proof of ability is, even small proofs that essentially confirm to you that you have the power to learn or to grow or to get over a particular adversity. So this exercise will help you to walk through that. We'll do the same sort of format where I'll give you 1 minute to go through the particular step, and then we'll move on to step 2. So for step 1, when you think about sharing your work, what doubts or negative thoughts pop up into your mind? Now, this is whatever comes freely to you, or doubts that you've had regularly, that's fine to add here. And I put a few examples. So it could be, no one will care about this, I'm no expert, I'm not creative enough, I'm not witty enough, I can't ask for money for this, etc. So I will give you 1 minute to write down a list for yourself, and then we'll move on to step 2. All right, 20 seconds. And time. Okay, so for step 2, from that list, you are going to write counter arguments for why each thought is likely untrue or unfounded or an assumption. So it's almost kind of like you're making a counter thought to the thought you just wrote out. So if you're saying, no one will care about this, the counter thought could be, someone will care about my story because I'm authentically speaking on a topic that affects them. If you had the thought, I am no expert, you can counter thought this with, all experts start somewhere and I'm on the right journey. Or if you're saying, can't ask for money for this, why would I do that? A counter thought could be, the value I bring to people with this product is worth paying for because it's truly serving a need they have. So take 1 minute to just write out a few counter thoughts to the list that you started, and I will give you a minute now. All right, 5 more seconds. And time. So the final step here is just really looking at your list and truly being honest with yourself about which of the thoughts that you wrote in step 1 are real based on limitations you actually genuinely have and which are projections. So the ones that are projections, I always say write false narrative next to it or a big fat FN next to the statement. So an example of this could be, maybe there are real fears around the financial risk of what you're doing versus just feeling like you aren't creative, which is very subjective. So it's always good to sit down and genuinely look at which of these fears are based in real world reality and which of these are just feelings, which may be an assumption or a subjective opinion. So I'll give you 1 minute and just write FN next to each statement that you feel is a projection or just false because it's not based in any proof. And then we'll move on to the final step. So we will start now. 20 more seconds. And time. All right, now we're moving on to the fun stuff. Now, this is where you get to really make a practical plan and information around your fears. And it's important to do that because fears are typically just anxieties about the unknowns. So, the more you can make things known, the less likely your fears will have validity or actual power over your actions. So, step 4 here is to mine your life for examples of skills that can help you overcome fears that you have identified are real. So, for instance, if you are struggling financially and you're really worried about building something because of it, you can make a 6-month plan to save up before you exit your job. So you have a plan. Maybe you're not going to immediately be able to create this thing right now or to share your story right now, but you can in the future, and you have a plan to get there so that that fear is based in some tactical way of solving the limitations around it. Or for instance, if learning is a skill that you have, it gives you many other skills. So it's proof that you can learn whatever skills you need that you feel like you're lacking currently to overcome your fear. And we forget that, we started out as human beings with little to no skills, and you just had to pick them up over time. I always use this example of, we didn't go to webinars or read tons of books to learn how to walk. You got up, you waddled, you fell down, you got back up, and you just kept doing it until you got better at it. And that's something we have to constantly remember when we're creating. No one comes out of the womb a walking adult. You have to learn and grow and fall and tumble. So it's important to keep in mind that fears are fine. It's a natural part of being human, but figuring out, okay, some of these fears are real limitations. I need a plan so I can feel okay about it, versus I'm just projecting because I'm worried about shame, I'm worried about failure, I'm worried about vulnerability. Those are all just feelings that don't have to necessarily have any real world reality. And yeah, that was step 5 as well. So that is the plan essentially that you would make for each fear that's real. So I would do both of these. I'll give you 2 minutes to do both. So focus one section of the minute on finding just proofs of your skills that can help you to feel confident in some of the fears that you identified, whether it's not knowing enough about a topic or feeling like you're not creative or whatever that may be. And then the next minute, make specific small plans for the things that you feel are based in reality, whether that's financial limitation, timing, that sort of thing. So I'll give you 2 minutes for both of these, and then we will stop to talk and just, go through any questions that you may have and dive in a little bit more. So I will start the 2 minutes now. All right, you have 1 more minute. – 20 more seconds. And time. So I just want to quickly go over why this particular writing exercises for limiting beliefs can be really powerful. And it's pretty intuitive, but the first point is it separates your projections versus your real limitations about your work. And it's very important to do that. There's studies in psychology about projection and reality, and there's so much fear that's based in us assuming the worst. And I know that most of you probably know human beings are wired for worst case scenario thinking, which is cute and fun in the past when we were like running from cheetahs and trying to survive. But in our modern world, that particular skill is overused, and it's definitely a muscle that we use a little too much. So it's important to really take a step back and be honest with yourself about how much of that fear is genuinely based in real world limitations versus just projections and assumptions. The second point is that it provides proof of your abilities and past accomplishments. And research shows making sure you really genuinely appreciate the abilities that you have, the small accomplishments that you've made is really important for boosting confidence. And it can be as small as being an organized person, being an empathetic listener, just being able to do particular small skills that essentially have helped you to achieve certain things, or even if you've achieved big things, giving yourself a pat on the back and being really appreciative of your skills. We usually breeze past our accomplishments because most of us are on sort of this treadmill of always needing bigger and better and more to prove that we're successful or that we're worthy. And we don't take a second to stop and just appreciate the milestones that we've actually achieved. So it's important to really take inventory so that you have actual real world proof of your skills so you can feel more confident to do things you haven't done before. And then finally, it just gives you a plan of attack. So there are specific real world limitations, and I think that's important to talk about with any inner fear narratives. I really don't believe in that sort of false optimism and you're running into the sunset pretending that there's no sorts of challenges or limitations out there. That's completely ridiculous. Then it's not useful or helpful. So it is helpful, though, to be real about what is my limitation right now? What are the things that I can do to start to move the needle forward, to start to kind of solve this particular limitation so I can get where I want to go? And it's better to make a year plan and get where you want to go versus ruminating for a year over that particular limitation and doing nothing. So this plan can help you to sort of start to eke away at any sort of iceberg that might be in the way of getting to where you want to go, or even sharing your story or building your messaging or pitching yourself, because half the battle is just being clear on what you need to do and what you need in terms of getting where you want to be. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I mean, I would love to open it up for questions or to, answer any particular insights you might have from either exercise. I'm going to exit out of the presentation here so I can see what's going on the screen. But does anyone have any questions?
I do. I'd like to hear what the other people think too, but I almost feel like the exercises could have been switched because I just know for me, like the second exercise was much more easier to do. And after doing that, I realized why I didn't do anything for the first, because it was a major block. And so I would like to hear like if other people found the same thing. But then the second thing is I have, ability and tools to get through limiting beliefs, but I'd also love to know like what your approach to it is, because for me, like I had some limiting beliefs, but then when it came to creating counter statements, I couldn't create any because I like deeply believe that those things are true. So I could come up with like the skills and the plan, but it was still around the fact that like my limiting beliefs are super true.
Got it. Did anyone want to answer her first question?
So I had the same kind of thought that you did actually about my limiting belief being, as far as I can tell, pretty true, right? Or I don't know, limiting belief is the right term, but the first thing we had to do on this exercise. And since this is involved in public speaking, just for a concrete example, my thought was that the people I'm speaking to, I work with a lot of guys in tech, right? And the people I'm speaking with are too self-involved to be interested in my personal story. So that impacts my ability to tell it or, any sort of advice. And I actually truly believe that is accurate as a statement. So regardless of what I do, I'm not really sure that changes their behavior in any way. Like my solution for that problem was to adapt the behavior of the people around me and truly believe that what I'm saying, like they do, is so important and that people should want to hear it and kind of like adopt that behavior. But I don't know how effective that is as a woman in that environment, right? Like I can go ahead and try to behave the same way they do, but I could just get cut off again and then let them bloviate, right? So yeah, I had the same thought. I was like, yeah, this is like an actual reality I'm experiencing. I don't know if anything I do can really impact that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think the importance of the exercise is the differentiator between who you can control and who you can't. You can't control anyone else's behavior. You can't make anyone do anything, but you can control what your behavior is. So for instance, a truth is if they are self-involved, you can counter that with, it doesn't matter if they are, the story is important enough to tell. Because if you don't do that, there's always going to be people who don't want to listen to you, right? There's always going to be people who feel intimidated by the truth that you're sharing. I have a prime example of that. I work in a pretty male-dominated industry, so marketing, advertising is my background, and I've been in rooms where I'm literally talking, no one's listening, and they repeat the thing I just said. So I started doing a practice of like, one thing I'm going to do is stop the meeting and say, I've just said that already. You're already said. So I'll literally stop and be like, this is a truth. Their truth is they're not listening. But my response to that truth is I'm going to stop and state it so that I feel good. And at least I've acknowledged in the room that that is happening. And it completely shifted how things were occurring. I just felt comfortable to share regardless. And it's frustrating because you're kind of working against certain systemic limitations. But even so, you still have to give yourself some of the tools and tips and techniques to overcome that anyways, because you can't control other people, you're person. But you definitely can't control, well, how do I respond to this in a way that feels authentic and genuine to me, and also can potentially still give me space to share what I believe is worth sharing.
All right, that's cool. I like that. Just address reality as it is for everyone, and then proceed as you choose.
So if you go through life trying to control people, you're going to be so frustrated. I mean, that's the whole point of like, I think we're so worried about trying to get other people to do things, and this exercise allows you to be free to do what the fuck you want to do, regardless of how other people act. And I think that is really powerful, especially for women. We're so socialized to worry about everyone else, to worry about how we're being perceived and how we're treating everybody. Men come in rooms and completely obliterate and annihilate and stomp through like a fucking elephant in a china shop, and they don't think twice about it because they feel they've been socialized to be okay with taking space. And I'm not saying to be reckless and harmful with what you do, but at the same time, I think worrying so much about other people's limitations can be limiting to yourself in ways that there might actually be people who you assume are more self-evolved than they might be, because it's still it's easy to maintain the status quo and do nothing, to say, oh, they're never going to listen to me. Same thing I thought about my story. I was like, no one's going to care. That's an easy way for me to get out of putting myself out there.
All right, awesome.
And it's a good point about the exercises. I thought about the order of them, because for some people it helps to clarify what they want to say first, because then they're like, okay, now I know what I want to say, but then I'm still worried about all these fears that are limiting me. So that's why I did it in that order, because some people, they don't know what they want to say, which is hard, because it's hard to figure out what you're fearful of if you don't know what you're saying. But either one could be done simultaneously. They don't have to be done in an exact order. They just address two different issues with communication, of being clear and purposeful and intentional of what you're saying, and then also overcoming specific fears that might limit what you're trying to do. Is there any other insights or questions? I know we have to kind of hop off in a couple minutes, but I'd love to hear anything else, any other insights, feedback, questions.
I've been running around. I did do the first exercise and as well as the second too, but I thought that they were both really helpful. I think one of the things that I kind of discovered, like on the inner narrative framework one, is that a lot of the things that I had thought about were all, I marked false narrative for all of them. And so they're like, I guess I tend to really be in my head about like these like perceived limitations and things. And they were all kind of things that I could kind of like dig into, and that probably aren't as big of things as I make them out to be, but in my head I get so caught up. So that was kind of interesting to kind of bring awareness to that. And like, when I was thinking about strategies to kind of counter those, I realized I do have like authentic networks around me that I can, lean into a little bit more, and people can be like, for example, I put like not prepared enough or interesting enough. Not sure if people will connect to what I'm doing. Not sure if I will be able to get more clients. And then like I have proof that all the people do seemingly find me interesting, and people are connecting with me, and I have been able to get clients. So it's like all kind of things that get caught up in my head. So it's kind of interesting to kind of like really bring focus to that, and like know that it's areas that I have worked to improve upon. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize sometimes when it's just not recognizing the reality of where we're at, because sometimes we could be so wrapped up in our head. I think there's a stat that we spend like 46% of our time not present. So that other time you're like a rapper inside your head, Jay-Z style, dissing yourself for like 46% of your day. And it's really easy to just completely become blind to the impression you have on other people, to the benefits that you are bringing to people. I think we really downplay our achievements, because if you play them up, people are worried about not being humble enough, or overstating their results or outcomes, but I think it is important to take inventory is what I call it. And that's totally okay. Just have a running list of the things you're proud of. And they don't have to be groundbreaking, I cured cancer achievements to feel, impactful, especially if they relate to what your values are and what your purpose is, which is really important for clarifying the work you're doing. You're like, here's the values and the truths about my work, and here how these things really confirm that. They confirm that this truth is resonating and that it solves this problem. And when you focus externally more on results in the problem versus you as an individual, you as your personality and all of that, it becomes less of a high stakes situation. It's just like, okay, we tried that wrench didn't work, that tool didn't work, but it's okay. We still have this other thing that we can try to solve this problem. So it's not so internalized, because I think way too much of our time is spent on our value being determined by our work. And I think separating that a bit can protect you from feeling like if someone critiques this or doesn't like it, that means they don't like me as a person. It's like, no, maybe they just didn't resonate with that particular thing, but that doesn't say anything about you as a person. So yeah, I know we have to close up soon, but thank you guys so much for joining. And, I'm always open to getting other feedback. And if you want to talk more offline or through email, I'm happy to answer any questions. But I will also be posting this recording in Dreamers and Doers. I hope it came out okay, because I've not recorded this before, so we shall see. But thank you guys so much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursdays. And I'm probably going to talk to you soon in Dreamers and Doers at some point.
Thank you.